We'd like to start now with our next session, and we are very happy, David Weinberger, that you're here, because now it's brain food. Information is changing, and you are one of the grand thinkers of how that changes. And we're very happy. David Weinberger is an acclaimed author, Harvard researcher, Harvard Berkman Institute. Very happy having you here, having such a mind, a forethinker of media and digital. And we're curious to learn from you. And the floor is yours now. Thank you. Applause.
Oh, thank you so much. It's very, very kind of you. Oh, do I get theme music? Oh darn, I've never had theme music. Thank you so much for having me. This conference is astounding, and I feel somewhat or intensely awkward giving a sort of standing up and talking, especially in the face of such collective knowledge on panels. Oh, I'm just going to kick it over. Wherever you leave it, I'm going to find it and I'm going to kick it over. Okay, so. Sorry. Thank you. I think so. Thank you. I'm also going to fall off the podium if I don't move off the podium. So I want to talk about knowledge, what's going on with knowledge, which is only obviously a part of what's going on. In fact, relatively a small part. But knowledge has played a very big part in our culture. Such a big part that we've defined who we are as knowers, as the creatures that know, rational animals. We've taken knowledge to be our highest calling, to be our destiny, to be our nature. And so if there are changes, also, by the way, knowledge makes lots of money for lots of people, especially when knowledge is scarce in media and all sorts of institutions that have power because of the scarcity of knowledge. So if something about knowledge is changing, then that should have effects throughout our culture. And that's what I want to talk about, starting with a very quick overview of what knowledge has been. And I should make clear, when I'm talking about knowledge, I'm really only talking about the West. I'm talking about the Greeks on, and I apologize for that, but that's what I know at least a little about. So in our tradition, our Western tradition, in English, we only have a single, there's no plural of knowledge. Knowledge is not a word, so it's singular. There's one set of knowledge about the world. And it's therefore it's the same for everyone. And it's binary, so if two people disagree, at most one of them can be right about how the world is. Two people who disagree, they can't both be right. Knowledge is way more binary than anything in a computer ever is or was. Knowledge is also simple traditionally, not in the sense that quantum mechanics is simple and string theory is simple, but in the sense that knowledge arises when we look out at the world. It seems so vast and complex and changing and shifting. And then underneath that, we try to find what's real, what there is to know. So knowledge is simple in that sense. It's simpler than the world that it explains. Again, traditionally in the West. And we've assumed that because there's a single order, you are your position in that order. There is a single order of the world. We argue about how it goes together, but there's a single order, and things are what they are in that order. Everything has one place and just one place that determines what it is. Knowledge, when it grew up, came from the streets of Athens, the great democracy of Athens, where anybody could express his views so long as it was a man and as long as you owned property. Well, other than that, everybody could express their views, and so there were many, many different opinions, and knowledge arose when people realized that not all of those opinions were worth very much. Only some of them deserved to be believed. So most of what we hear and see is not knowledge. Knowledge is scarce. It exists as a scarcity. That's why we created knowledge in the first place. And knowledge is settled traditionally. Once we know something, we don't have to then re-know it. We know it. It's done. It's settled. It's published. It's final. It's set in stone. It's done. So knowledge traditionally is settled. So those properties of knowledge, of traditional knowledge, it's not by accident that they're basically also the properties of books, of the means by which we preserve and communicate knowledge. It is no accident that knowledge reflects the characteristics of its medium. Because Marshall McLuhan was right, The medium is the message. But I think we can actually take one step further than that. I think that's true. But there's a computer scientist and philosopher named Andy Clark who wrote a book called Being There, which, yes, is a reference back to Heidegger, by the way. Really good book, in which he makes the case that humans have always thought with their things. In the West, we think that thinking and knowing goes on in our heads, but in fact, a physicist simply cannot do her work without a whiteboard, without a chalkboard to do notes on, or paper to make notes on, or a computer to do calculations on. We think out in the world with tools, says Andy Clark, and that is an important evolutionary advantage for our species. So knowing is not in our head. It's what we do with tools. The tools that we've had all have been made out of atoms up until recently, and so they've reflected the limitations of atoms. Atoms form a natural scarcity, but now we're digitizing everything. And when I say everything, I mean, well, not everything. And if we could get past some of the copyright stupidity, we could digitize a whole lot more. But basically, we're digitizing everything we can. But we're not just digitizing it, we're also connecting it. So, for example, this is the Kindle. The Kindle is simply a digitizing machine. It is not a connecting machine, so it's a very bad example of this. With the Kindle, the only thing the Kindle connects to is Jeff Bezos' store. So it's not really networked. But the e-book that is coming at some point will not only digitize the books, but will also connect to other e-books and to other computers and to the web, and we will socialize reading for the first time. So we're digitizing. By the way, you can see here that even Jeff Bezos cannot find a way to hold the Kindle that does not press buttons. So we're digitizing and we're connecting. And that changes. That's the new medium, so to speak. That's the tool that we use for thinking in the world, so that has to change knowledge. So I want to look very quickly at 3 different areas of change in knowledge: abundance, links, and authority. And starting with abundance, because we are in an age of abundance now. There's unfortunately, not in many material goods like water and these days money, but intellectually, absolutely, an age of abundance. There's so much good stuff. There's so much good stuff. Yossi showed a bunch of it from YouTube. There's more good stuff than we could ever possibly see. An abundance of the good, but of course also an abundance of crap. Now, the fact is that we are much better at dealing with the abundance of crap than we are at dealing with the abundance of good. So we make our way through the spam, and we're not getting flooded with pornography unless we've asked for it. We're good at managing the abundance of crap. It's the availability of this abundance of good things to read, stimulating, interesting things to read and to view and to interact with. That's what is really sending a shockwave through our culture, because we have a culture and institutions of culture that are based around the idea that there really isn't very much that's good. We've got to scrape it up and find the talent. Well, when there's an abundance of good, our basic cultural institutions start to fall apart. They're not built for that. In fact, the most basic idea we've had of how we proceed changes, because the old idea, which made sense back in the days of scarcity, is that you get some experts who build a collection. They choose what should be in it, and most importantly, what is not worth being in it, what is not worth our time and attention, and then they organize that stuff so that we can then find our way through it. But that means anticipating not only what we're going to be interested in, but what sense we're going to make of it. But that's what we had to do. So the Library of Congress, an institution that I, by the way, completely love in the US, central libraries more or less, gets 7,000 new works every day, and they have a staff of hundreds to manage that, because that's what it takes. But there are people here who have already Twittered 7,000 times this morning. And so that system just doesn't scale. It just doesn't work at the scale that we're producing things. In fact, in general, control does not scale, except at tremendous human costs. And many of our institutions have been in the business of sacrificing those human values in order to scale, but fundamentally, control does not scale. And that's one of the most basic things that the internet has taught us, that an uncontrolled environment, an uncontrolled network will call forth an abundance of the good and also an abundance of crap. And so we change our basic strategy. And I think we've changed it already in many instances. So we say, well, no, let's not figure out what few things are worth looking at. Let's gather everything. It's cheaper to include than it is to exclude. So let's just include everything. So for example, in the old days, you would have said, well, articles about Britney Spears and Lindsay Lohan and Paris Hilton, and I'm absolutely distressed and ashamed that you all know who these American cultural people are. Nevertheless, you would have said, no, don't include them in our collection because that's trivia, and you would be right. But at the same time, you would have made this conference impossible, this academic work impossible. This is an article on Britney's tears, the abject female celebrity in post-emotional society. If you correctly had kept all of the Britney Spears stuff out, a whole area of academic research would not have been possible. You cannot anticipate what people will be interested in. Nobody can, because their interests are too varied and because we don't know what history will do. So for example, when you're putting together your collection of things worth paying attention to, things worth knowing, you very likely would never ever have thought to include the notes from the library meetings in Wasilla, Alaska. Because you could not possibly have known that Wasilla was one of the residents of Wasilla was going to become important. You could not possibly have, who could possibly have anticipated that? So you would have missed all of that valuable information and knowledge. So now we get to say goodbye to Sarah Palin. And this is just to cleanse the palate. Palin is going to come back at the end of my presentation, sorry. So second thing, you get together this huge collection, and then it starts to grow connections organically. Every link gets saved and preserved, and over time this becomes a super saturated with meaning, with reference. And then finally, rather than deciding how people are going to navigate, you filter on the way, you let people, the users, filter on the way out so that you do not have to decide how people are going to think about this stuff. Give them the tools so that they can decide at the moment. Well, this results in a very messy system. This is the old way of knowing where everything has its place. If who we are depends upon who we are in the old sort of system, where we are in the organization, well, this is how we tell who we are in the new sort of organization. And the messier it is, the better. The more information, the more links in and out, the more. This is the opposite of the old database view where you have a few columns and you fill them in with known. In the world of the social network, you get a far better reflection of the actual messiness of our social involvement, of who we are. It is incredibly messy, but cleaning it up would absolutely not only remove information, it would destroy relationships. The mess is essential. The mess is a better reflection of who we are than the nice, orderly systems of knowledge that we've had. Second, links. Can't overestimate the importance of links in this. The old idea was that knowledge fit between covers, that you divided knowledge up into topics that literally fit between covers. Part of this was so that you could have a sense of mastery. There are power relationships saturating the history of knowledge all the way through, of course. So divide into topics. You can divide and conquer and own your area and be a subject matter expertise. And there's still, of course, value in that. But if you look at how two encyclopedias handle the topic of philosophy, one is Britannica, the great English language encyclopedia, and it has 180,000 consecutive words on the topic of philosophy. That's quite a bit. That's 6 books of normal size in Britannica. If you look at Wikipedia, it's 9,000 words, the article on philosophy, which is actually quite long for a Wikipedia article. It's longer than it's supposed to be. But so it looks like Britannica must have 20 times the information, the knowledge that Wikipedia does. But in fact, it's 9,000 words in Wikipedia and untold millions of links throughout the whole thing, so that when you look at the philosophy article at Wikipedia, like every other word is hyperlinked. And so then you want to go exploring and you click on one of the links, it's to the Renaissance or to Hellenistic philosophy. Well, the Hellenistic philosophy link definitely leads you to something within the topic of philosophy. But suppose you click on the link in the second paragraph about faith. And now you go off wandering through the faith areas and connections there. Is faith part of the topic of philosophy? I don't know. That's a really good question. Wikipedia doesn't answer it. It leaves it loose edged. It leaves the connection there. But this is and you're going to have to decide whether faith is part of philosophy. But that's, again, a far better reflection of the nature of the topic than Britannica's 180,000 consecutive words. Philosophy as a topic, it doesn't fit from here to there. It does touch on faith and on history and on biography and psychology and everything else you can think of. And so the linked Wikipedia approach is a far better reflection of our knowledge of what the subject matter is, even though it's much looser edged. And this is not just the cognitive side of it. On a blog, you will find typically many, many, many links. Links have a normative, an ethical dimension as well. So this is pretty much a random screen capture. There's 43 words on this blog, 12 of them are linked. So 25% of the content is linked, as a scientific sample. In each case, those links from this blogger are saying, please go away. Please, here's something interesting. I think you'll find it interesting. Just click. All you have to do is click. Please click right here. I'm telling you why. This is really interesting. Click. For God's sake, just click and leave my site, will you? Go explore the world. Links, in terms of ethics, are generous. And knowledge, trying to fit between covers so it can be owned and published and attributed to an individual, what's the opposite of generous? It's been stingy. That's what happens in an era of scarcity. In the era of abundance and of abundance of links, knowledge only becomes possible insofar as it's generous. So knowledge has been bound up with authority. That's where a lot of the economic value and social value of knowledge has been. So a couple of hours after Sarah Palin was announced as vice presidential pick by John McCain, the single best source that I found for information about her was the Wikipedia article, which is, not what you expect from an encyclopedia, but Wikipedia. So it was comprehensive. It was fair. It was accurate and it was fair. It was a really nice piece that was done. What was more impressive about it, though, was the discussion page, the talk page about Sarah Palin, where, of course, people who contribute to the article argue over why they put in a phrase or idea that they did. They go back and forth, they come to a resolution. This is a list simply of the topics that were discussed within the first couple of weeks of this article, argued about. That page, the talk page, is an amazing resource for historians and for us to understand previous ages. But it's also a sign of where authority is gone. That if you wonder why that article says what it does, you can find out. Go to the talk page and you'll see the argument back and forth. That gives that page more authority. It's not simply words on a page, it's words that have emerged from a social conversation between people who are trying to arrive at a neutral view of the topic. Authority, think about Britannica's attitude towards this, or any of the encyclopedias. They desperately do not want us to see the discussions in which the topic and nature of their articles were written. They consider that would weaken their authority. If we were to see the doubt and the uncertainty and the arguments that raged back and forth among the editors and the authors, that would weaken our idea of their authority. On Wikipedia, it strengthens authority. Wikipedia's authority, in fact, comes from that transparency. It also comes from, well, it comes from many things, but it also comes in part from Wikipedia's willingness to acknowledge its own fallibility. So Wikipedia articles all the time have these notices, multiple notices saying, there's something not right with this article, please make it better. And they have over 100 different ways already, different signs you can put up for ways in which Wikipedia articles can be wrong. And you can make your own, because it's Wikipedia, if one of those 100 doesn't work. Whenever Wikipedia puts one of these things up, it not only encourages us to make it better, this socializing of knowledge that's happening, but it also tells us implicitly that Wikipedia is not trying to impress us with its authority. It's not trying to talk in this tone of voice. I am Wikipedia, and you should believe me because I am the great and mighty encyclopedia. That is not their tone of voice. Their tone of voice, their body language says, we're human. We get things wrong. We're never entirely right about anything. There's always room for improvement. The fallibility of authority is making Wikipedia more authoritative. And that's true not just for Wikipedia. It's true for almost every blogger. Bloggers who talk in a human voice, who do not simply assert themselves that I am the mighty blogger, but instead acknowledge that it's their opinion. This is what they think. Here's why, and engage in the back and forth. And institutions that insist on still talking in that tone of voice, the official media tone of voice, are increasingly going to alienate us they're going to lose their authority, they're going to lose our trust, and we just won't give a flying crap about them. We're tired of the inhuman voice of knowledge and authority. And increasingly, the authority of knowledge, of knowing, is going to come from a human voice that's comfortable with being human. So I know that to many people it looks like the mighty vessel of knowledge is being overturned by mere Google and bloggers and all the rest of it, and that's not what's happening. I think instead what's happening is that we're contextualizing knowledge. We still know how to know things. We always will. We use a scientific method. We use peer review. We're going to continue. We have trials and evidence in the law. We will continue doing that. Knowledge is very, very important. But it turns out that we are interested in knowledge not simply because we are the knowing creatures, but because we want to understand our damn world. And knowledge is a part of it, but it's not all of it. Understanding is deeper, richer, and gives value to knowledge. So if you look at the words that characterize traditional knowledge, and then if you look at them too quickly because you press the button too fast, and then look at the words that are characterizing knowledge in the age of the connected network, those words change from the regal words of knowledge to these words, which are far more characteristic of the network itself. These reflect the network just as the previous words reflected the nature of books and libraries. But I think maybe the most important thing to notice about these words is that they reflect not simply the characteristics of the network that we're building for ourselves, they also reflect us. They're far more reflective and truer of us as humans. And the fact that the very same words that characterize our network, our medium, also now characterize who we are and have always been as humans, I think helps explain why for so many of us in this room and across the world, the internet is not simply a medium for knowing things, but is a far more profound reflection of who we are in a way in which we can engage with one another in ways that are true to who we are. Thank you. So,